Good morning, everybody. KT here with Wise Images Photography, and today we are going to go ahead and talk about how to get razor sharp images all the time, and also some things that can potentially be affecting why you aren't getting those razor sharp images that you're looking for. Now, there are lots of different techniques and things, and there's so much that I could go over, but I'm going to go ahead and go over 4 starting points to just get you going. So let's get started. Number 1, let's go ahead and talk about your stance and camera stabilization. So whenever you guys have a telephoto lens, it magnifies everything. So there are some tips here with your stance. The first thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and put your feet about shoulder width apart. If you notice, I can kind of move back and forth a little bit, but if I were to put my feet by like this, and I'm trying to go back and forth, I'm a little bit more unstable with my feet together in a parallel line. But if I put my feet about shoulder width apart, it gives me a little bit more strength and power to be able to hold my stance. The next thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and you're going to grab a hold of your lens, you're going to go ahead and grab a hold of the right side of your camera, and you're going to go ahead and tuck your elbows in so that way it reduces the movement that is going on here. Now, if you hold it out like this, your arms are gonna get tired, you're gonna get fatigued, and it's gonna make it a lot harder to stabilize it. So go ahead and tuck those elbows in. The next thing you wanna do is you wanna go ahead and press your eye up against your camera. Now with glasses, it's a little bit harder, but if you can try to get that eye as close as you can, or get the camera touching as many points on your face as possible, that will make it easier. Like I said, us people with glasses, it makes it a little bit difficult, but we do the best that we can. Now, a lot of times, if the subject is stationary, what I will do is not only will I go ahead and bring the camera to my face, but I'll also breathe in, hold it, and then I will gently press the shutter button. So it's kind of like this: breathe in, hold, and then go ahead and press. Now, if you are going to be panning to get the shot, and instead of like taking a step to go get that shot, what you want to do is stay tucked in, and you want to move your entire upper body with your camera. So those are some tips about stabilizing your stance and stabilizing your camera. Now, next up, we're going to go ahead and talk about the monopod. Now, as you can see that I have a monopod here. Now, it's kind of the same philosophy that we talked about with kind of widening your stance. You don't want to hold on to the camera here, because if you hold on to the camera here, you're right in line with your pole. And so it's still kind of very all over the place. However, if you widen out and kind of just put your arm on the edge of your lens right here, it kind of makes it a little bit more stable. Make sure that you guys got your feet about shoulder width apart. Make sure you're doing some of those other techniques. I try to keep at least this elbow locked in, and then I bring my eye up to the camera, and then that way I go ahead and I will sometimes even hold my breath on this one. Deep breath in, hold, take a nice little shot, and then there you go. So like I said, just go ahead and stick your hand out just a little bit further, just so that you can hold it, because a lot of times what will happen is the wind will get kicking up, and that will actually make the hood kind of be almost like a sail and just kind of takes it with you. So go ahead and tuck that elbow in over the edge, and you should be good to go. All right, next up, we're gonna go ahead and talk about tripods. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about using a tripod. The nice thing about a tripod is it's very super stable for the most part. As long as you don't have wind out, be cognizant of the wind, because that can shake your tripod. It can also make your tripod fall over. One of the things that I would do is, if it's a very windy day, is try to kind of weigh down your tripod somehow. Some tripods have hooks on them, and so you can maybe attach your camera bag to it to kind of keep it more in place and a little bit more stable. Now, whenever I use a tripod, it's normally when I'm knowing that I want to shoot water and I want to slow down my shutter speed. So what I'll do is I'll set up the tripod, and even you taking that picture is going to give you some camera shake. So what I do is I normally put my timer release on maybe like a 2 to 5 second delay, so that way it gives time for the camera and everything to kind of stabilize while my hands are off, and then it goes ahead and it takes the shot. Also, another thing is if you have a camera strap, you're going to want to go ahead and take that camera strap off, because if you have a camera strap, that will allow the wind to kind of catch it, and that will also make your camera move as well. So that is basically my couple of tips with using a tripod. Now, what happens if you don't want to carry a tripod and you don't want to have to carry a monopod around with you? Well, you can use the surroundings around you to be able to help to stabilize your camera. Like, for example, right now, we got this nice boardwalk. I could always go ahead and use the boardwalk as my stabilizer. That is a lot of the reasons why I have the skin wrap on my camera, because I don't want to mess up my lens. So I've put the wrap on so that way I have no problem just dropping it down on, you know, whether it's a fence or a boardwalk. And by the way, make sure it is not an electric fence. Not that I almost might have possibly gotten electrocuted one time. Luckily, my friend told me to stop before I did. But needless to say, you can go ahead and use a fence. You can use a fence post. You can use the boardwalk. Also too, like maybe you don't have those things. You can go ahead and lean up against the tree and use the side of the tree on your camera as a way to go ahead and stabilize that lens. Also, you can go ahead and get on the ground and you can use your knees to help support your camera, so that way you have another way to go ahead and stabilize your camera without having to carry a tripod or a monopod. The second tip is having good lighting. Now, I like to shoot earlier in the morning or later in the afternoon when I'm out doing my photography sessions. Now, do I sometimes shoot in the middle of the day? Absolutely, because sometimes I get out there and I'm just having fun and I don't want to stop. But the problem with that is once I get towards the middle of the day, what you're going to find is you're going to have harsher light. You are probably going to go ahead and blow out some of your highlights on the bird or the subject that you are photographing at the time. So I would definitely recommend shooting earlier in the morning or late at night and get that really good directional light. Now, you may have also heard that another good time to shoot is on a cloudy day. Now, this can be good or this could be bad. It really honestly depends on how many clouds are out for the day. So if you kind of have like a semi-cloudy day or maybe a thin layer of clouds, it's not too bad. And the reason being is because the clouds will act like a softbox. So it will give you that nice, beautiful lighting that we like to have, that nice even lighting instead of that harsh lighting that we tend to try to steer away from, unless that's the style of genre of photography that you like, if you like that hard lighting look, right? So if you have thin clouds, it gives you a nice softbox look with great lighting, soft shadows and whatnot. Now, if you have tons of clouds out there, and I mean it's just like covered in clouds, super thick clouds, then that's going to give you a little bit of a problem, because then basically what happens is all the light fragments kind of go like that, right? And they're ricocheting all over the place, and it is so thick that the light can never get to you. And then that's why you're going to go ahead and end up with super soft images at that point, because you don't have that good directional lighting. Now, if you guys are finding that these tips are helping you out, definitely make sure you hit that like button so others know that this is a really cool video. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about number 3. Let's talk about shutter speed. Shutter speed is important because this is what freezes your image. So what I like to do is I like to think of a race car. So normal people normally go like, 70 miles per hour. when they're going down the highway, right? But if you're a race car driver and you're at the racetrack, you're gonna go like 200 miles per hour or even above, right? So why do I think of a race car when I think of shutter speed? Because in order to capture a faster image, you have to have a higher shutter speed. So something like, 1/500th, 1/1600th, 1/3200th, right? You have to have a high shutter speed. So I know that it's a fraction. When I look at it and I think, okay, and I'm just looking at the denominator, 500 to 3200 to 4000. A race car, We start off at 0, then maybe 70 miles per hour, and then 100 miles per hour, and then 200 miles per hour. So that race car is going fast. And I kind of looked at it as the denominator was my speed. And I kind of forgot that it was a fraction, if that makes any sense to you all. And that's how I remembered that the faster the race car, the faster your shutter speed, the more you can freeze the image. So I hope that idea kind of helps you all out with understanding that you need to have a faster shutter speed to catch those faster objects, kind of like a race car is fast as well. All right, so how do you figure out what is the minimum amount of shutter speed that you need to keep your images sharp? So you may have heard about some formulas that were out there that would definitely go ahead and help you out. Now, the cool thing is as technology is getting better, you may or may not have to follow these rules because the stabilization inside of cameras is getting fantastic. But let's go ahead and go over these rules anyway, so that way it kind of gives you a good starting point. So let's say, for example, you're wanting to stop your movement, not the object's movement, but your movement, what you do as you tend to do your photographs. Let's say, for example, we had a 60mm lens. What you would do is the formula is 1 over the focal length. So basically, that means that you would want to shoot at 1 over 60. That would go ahead and prevent your own minimum shake. Now let's say, and then that would be more for like a static object. Now for me personally, as I've gotten a little bit older, I can't hold it that smoothly and as calmly at 1/60th of a second like I could when I was younger. But I digress. Now, if your object is moving, what you want to do is you want to go 1 over your focal length times 2. So let's take that 60mm ideology of that lens again. You would go 60 times 2, that would give you 120. So it would be 1 over 1/20th of a second, right? Now, we don't have 1 over 120, so I would just bump it up to 1 over 125. And that would be the minimum amount for yourself and for a moving object. But of course, it depends on the type of moving object that you have. When it comes to portrait photography, I tend to shoot from 1/125th to 1/250th of a second. Seems to be my range when I'm photographing a portrait. Now, if it's a child, you're gonna wanna go on the higher end. If it's an adult, you can go a little bit more on the lower end of your speed with your shutter speed. Now, when I'm photographing birds, I tend to shoot at 1/3200th of a second. What I would do is go ahead and go out, do some test shots, and go ahead and play with your camera a little bit, because there are a little bit of difference and changes regarding whether or not you have a full frame or a crop sensor camera. Now, you also have your ISOs, and if you go ahead and you crank up your ISOs, you can definitely crank up your shutter speed a lot faster, because the ISOs affect the sensitivity of your sensor. So the higher the ISO, the more light that you are able to go ahead and produce, so you can get that faster shutter speed. But the thing is you're gonna get more grain, and it really depends on your camera. I used to have a really old camera when I first started shooting, and you couldn't crank up the ISOs that high because you would get too much noise. Right now I have a D750. It's not the newest technology, but it's not old either. And I was able to move up to like going to 10,000 ISO before my pictures got where they would like just look horrible, and I can't, get them back if they go over 10,000 ISOs. So with newer cameras, you probably are able to go ahead and crank up those ISOs a lot higher. So if you are going to crank up those ISOs, what you need to think about is, are you willing to have grain in it? How much grain are you willing to have in it? And really, it's going to be up to your own preference of what you want to happen with your photographic image. Now, let's go ahead and talk about number 4, which is finding the sweet spot of your lens. So what do I mean by finding that sweet spot on your lens? Basically, when you shoot wide open, normally that's about 2 to 3 stops down from wherever your aperture begins. So like if you have a 5, an f5 lens, you're probably looking at like a 6.1, I think 7.3, and possibly an 8. So what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna kind of play with your camera a little bit. I would go ahead and set up like a tripod, set up a stationary object, and go ahead and shoot at those different apertures and see how your lens is responding and see what is the sweet spot. The KT, I want to be able to open my aperture wide open because I want to let in as much light as possible and get that beautiful bokeh feeling to my image. Or you may be on the opposite end of the spectrum and you may say, hey, KT, I want everything in focus, so I want to do an f22 and go ahead and get it all in focus. The only problem with shooting either wide open or closing up is that you would either get aberration or diffraction. And in both scenarios, what's going to happen is make your images get degraded and they're not going to be sharp, sharp, sharp. So when you shoot wide open or you close it up, you're going to get those two scenarios. So how do you get around these two different situations? Because you want bokeh or you want your entire image in shot. Well, here you go. Whenever it comes to the bokeh, you are going to go ahead and have your object step away from the background. And by stepping away from the background, the greater the distance, the more bokeh you're gonna get. Now, if you want everything all perfectly sharp all together, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go ahead and take 3 different pictures. You would focus on the foreground, the middle, and then the background. And what you would do is you would go ahead and stitch those pictures together during post-processing. And that's how you could get everything all sharp in your image. So those would be your workarounds. Now, if you guys are finding value in this, please make sure you go ahead and hit that like button so that way we can go ahead and help other people out. There are lots of other tips out there on helping you guys with taking sharp images, but I am hoping that these 4 tips that I went over today will help you create the type of imagery that you want to create. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section below what tip you think is going to be the most useful for you. Please go ahead and hit that notification bell and subscribe if you haven't hit where's the notification bell? Whoop, notification bell right there for you. Please go ahead and make sure you hit it. Go ahead and subscribe if you like this content so that way you don't miss it in the future. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in today. I greatly appreciate it. Remember, you are awesome. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll see you later, alligator. Your images. Apparently the bird doesn't like me having a conversation about getting razor sharp images. I forgot where we were. Now, where were we? Okay, so there are definitely a lot of different ways to go ahead and get razor sharp images, and apparently this bird really does not want me to continue this recording.